welcome to the podcast that is yet to be named. You can kind of call this the sequel to the 30330 podcast. We're coming up with a name. It'll be around eventually for you. But in the meantime, we thought we'd get started. Now, all of the previous content for the 30330 podcast is still available on the page, but we will not be continuing that podcast. And in this podcast, Jacob and I will be basically just reviewing movies, TV shows, and anything else that we feel like reviewing in the realm of storytelling, essentially.
Yes.
So, with that, we figured we could get to the first episode, which we'll be discussing WandaVision, which that ended last Friday.
Yes.
The
first ever Marvel TV series. It was quite interesting to watch. I mean, a lot of things happened.
It absolutely was.
In the show.
It's an interesting show. A lot of people have very interesting opinions on this show. And the first of which that I thought was that I think that the first 3 episodes, I didn't like them, like, nearly at all. Like, there were those little moments where they would hint at something, and there was the end of episode 3, but otherwise, like, it was just too much sitcom, and it would not be a sitcom that I'd like. Like, I wouldn't enjoy watching that show.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm not a very huge enthusiast about sitcoms. They're not my favorite thing to watch. Of course, there's the iconics, like, Full House and Friends, which, I grew up with, but beyond that, I'm not a huge fan of sitcoms. So definitely those first 3 episodes were tough to get through, but I knew it was all in the purpose of trying to set things up.
Yeah, which is, I did have some kind of faith, just based on the trailers. Like, I knew it wasn't going to stay that way for the entire show. Like, there was, really no way that they could do that. But I think the show vastly improved at episode 4. Like, as soon as they started explaining what was going on outside, and they introduced Monica and all the sword people and everything, I thought that's when it really started to pique my interest.
Yeah, I would say it definitely, once it kind of came back to the original MCU type of element, then that definitely, like, hooked a lot more people in. And I feel like I should definitely say this. Spoilers for WandaVision, in case you haven't watched it, which I don't know why you haven't. It was a very good show.
Yeah.
But yeah, once they introduced the outside world portion, I'll put it that way, it definitely took the overall show to, like, that next step. It was kind of basic, it being a sitcom about Wanda and Vision and their life, of what the life they would have wanted together be like. But then once, like you said, Sword and Monica and Jimmy Woo, can't forget Jimmy Woo,
Yep.
Got introduced, it really did make it much more enjoyable and much more watchable. Even though it was watchable before, but way more enjoyable now.
Well, it started to bring up a lot of questions, like, more moral questions. Like, another note that I had, I really like the undertones of like, philosophy in this show. I like how there's a lot of talk about, like, the morality of what she's doing, and, even though, like, what she's doing, holding people against their will is clearly immoral, you do feel for her. You kind of get why she didn't even intend to really do it. It just kind of happened in a moment of emotional distress, and she kept doing it out of selfishness. But then you also have, like, how Vision and the White Vision, they stopped fighting and they just talked about the ship of Theseus. Like, there's all these really interesting aspects. I think it was less about fighting and more just about emotions, grief, morality, those sorts of questions.
Yeah, no, it definitely brought some of those things forth. I mean, even just between her interaction with the people at Sword and Monica, she really just didn't. she didn't realize exactly what she was doing, but in the moment she had no remorse for what she was doing. I mean, technically for Wanda, this was just one big therapy session for her. I mean, that's kind of the point of the whole show. She wants to not get rid of, but move on from Vision. Like, Vision is dead. He's not going to be there for her anymore. And basically what got her through all of her previous trauma is now gone, and therefore inducing more trauma to her. But like you said, with the whole ship of Theseus type of thing, obviously in the moment and just thinking it on a surface level, it seemed like their whole interaction, Vision and White Vision, was just kind of like, oh, yeah, they're going at it, killing each other. And then it was like, the ship of Theseus? Do you know of the ship of Theseus?
I mean, like, there was a reason, because he did
definitely
say, like, I'm not the real Vision. Then it's like, well, if you're not the real Vision, which...
And what am I?
Yeah, which is a really, I mean, the ship of Theseus in philosophy is just an interesting idea anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it does call into a question a lot of things, and what does make something that thing. Like, it's very...
Like, what defines it to be the original or the same? You know what I mean? Just because it's like Vision, Wanda's created Vision is Vision in essence.
Yeah.
Like, in soul, in mind. But White Vision is...
him in body, but
it's
not
like,
mind.
It's like this is probably the best way you could put it. Wanda's Vision is Vision in software. White Vision is Vision in hardware.
Yeah, I mean it exactly, and I think that's kind of a lot of what the show's about. It's just talking about like what is the essence of somebody, like at what point are they who they are, or at what point are they someone else? It's like I mean, you see that with the townspeople that are taken captive. You know, they are technically themselves, but they're, you know, being forced to be something different.
Mm-hmm.
You see that with Vision. Then there's questions about like the kids and how much of their identity is connected to the hex, how much of it is like actually out there and, you know, sort of just
well, exactly. I mean, it speaks for itself in the end scene. The children were more of an anomaly, or at least Billy was. I don't know about Tommy, but because Billy also has magic, just like Wanda, there's definitely something going on with him, at least, based on the ending scene. But beyond that, like, that is a good question. Like, are they still connected to the Hex? Does, like, the Hex exist in the multiverse, and, like, she's gonna take them from some other world, or whatever? There's just so many questions that arose at the end of it that it's way too much to think about as of right now. I feel like now, because The Falcon and Winter Soldier is coming out next week, or this week by the time this episode releases, that it's like we shouldn't really think so much about it. I mean, personally, that's what I thought about the movie schedules, you know, coming out every couple of months, where it kind of gave you a ton of time to think about, theorize, and absolutely digest the movie that you had just watched. But now with like these whole TV series and these movies coming out, it's like it gives you much less time to think, to where you're at the point now where it's just like, all right, it happened, next thing. It happened, next thing, and very minimal thinking.
Yeah, which of course they're doing that because they don't want you to ever have a time where you can cancel your subscription. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to. They're doing the same exact thing with Star Wars, where it's going to be like, okay, we got this show coming out, and then literally a week later we're going to start up this show. Like, I'm sure the Bad Batch is going to come out, and then maybe they'll drop, you know, Visions, if that's coming out this year. And then they'll do Book of Boba Fett, you know, stuff like that. But
yeah, to keep you hooked in on keeping the subscription.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have Falcon and Winter Soldier coming up, which that's not going to answer any of the WandaVision questions you might have. And then there's Black Widow. That's also not going to answer anything. We're quite literally going to have to wait all the way until Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness for anything to clearly be wrapped up. And that might not even wrap up everything, because that then is supposed to connect to the third Spider-Man film.
Yeah.
Not Far From Home.
Can't go.
Can't Go Home
or something like that. Yeah.
I can't
No
remember.
Way Home.
No Way Home.
Yeah.
No Way Home. That's it.
And yeah, I think, and I think that's something to expect with this MCU now. How they did say that they're planning on kind of splitting it up. Like you're gonna have like you're gonna have like the normal MCU where it's gonna be a lot like Phase 1 and 2, where it's some of Phase 1, like it's more like on Earth fighting against like government things and organizations. Then you're gonna have like the multiverse weird stuff MCU, which is gonna be like Doctor Strange type stuff, WandaVision, or Scarlet Witch, all that sort of stuff. And then you're gonna have like the space MCU, which is gonna be like Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be very separated. I'm sure at some point they'll come back together. Or at least I hope so. I mean, I don't want that to be like, oh, we never see them all together again. But
well, we won't see them within Phase 4.
Oh no, I know not in Phase 4 but at some point, like
in the future, yes.
It's not going to be like these things never cross paths, but yeah.
But I mean, what's also super interesting about WandaVision was it was the first MCU or just piece of the MCU that was based on comics, which you could make the claim it was like, oh well, all of the MCU was based off of comics, or it's like, no shit, Sherlock. I'm like, where do you think they got Iron Man from? But beyond that, like, it actually is a comic book like story.
Yeah.
Like, they took the storyline from the comic books, and now of course they changed it. Some for economic reasons, governmental reasons. For example, like Mephisto, they didn't want to release a devil-like character, or else they wouldn't make any money in China, which is strange, but it's true. So they steer clear of Mephisto, even though that was theorized throughout the whole duration of the show. But yeah, it was like the characters, or at least the overall arcing storyline was that of House of M, which, if you go back to the Civil War era, was that phase 2 or phase 3?
That was the beginning of Phase 3.
Beginning of Phase 3. Okay, so you go back then, or even back to Age of Ultron. There are interviews of Elizabeth Olsen, who she actually read some of the Marvel comics growing up, and her favorite series was the House of M, and back then she never thought she'd be able to actually make that into fruition, but they actually did. Kevin Feige, for those who don't know, Kevin Feige he runs Marvel, basically. WandaVision was essentially his creation. He created it, and yeah, he made Elizabeth Olsen's favorite comic book series into reality. I mean, obviously, like I said before, it's not close, not exact, but I mean, you can definitely tell that, like, oh, yep, this is this, that is that, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that in all cases, it not following the comics exactly is necessarily a bad thing, especially in something like the MCU, where, like, going into it, you're not really expecting an exact copy of the comics, like, because if you didn't know about the House of M, you wouldn't have known. You would have just thought this is like another MCU thing that's totally independent from the comics. It's not like something with anime where, like, if you don't follow the manga, you're fucked and people are gonna hate you for it. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to, like, this is different. So I don't get why some people are like super pissed that it didn't follow the comics exactly. I think in the MCU, when you're not expecting that to happen, it makes it a lot more interesting, because it's like, there are differences. You don't know what's coming. I mean, I don't understand, like, why you'd want to watch the show if you knew, like, from the very beginning what was going on. Like, because especially getting through the first couple episodes, the only thing that keeps you interested is the mystery. Like, we know the small little nuggets of information. Otherwise, there's nothing to really, like, keep you along. I mean, it's just a sitcom at that point.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, but another issue, I wouldn't say it's an issue. Some people think that this point is an issue, but personally, I think it's wonderful. I think it's great because it gets people thinking about the show and it gets people talking about it. But because it's based on, or at least I'll just say influence. I won't even say based. Say it's influenced on the House of M comics. It's that people started making theories online of like what's going to be included, what's what, and like how ultimately it's going to end up. So like one of the small minute things that people theorized was in, I think it was episode 6 or 7, right before the boys essentially got captured by Agatha. There was a fly like on the curtains. People were like, "Oh, that's Mephisto. That's Mephisto." And then the next episode after, the damn rabbit eats the fucking fly. It's like, okay, cool. You got us thinking that, like, oh yeah, that could be Mephisto, because at this point in time we still didn't know if Mephisto was gonna become a reality or not. And the fly just gets eaten, and we're like, okay, instantly shoved down the drain.
Yeah.
That's one example of the little things. But then another one, which I know a lot of people got excited for, and the director of WandaVision actually came out with a statement after it finished saying that that was never planned, was that Monica's so-called aerospace engineer was Reed Richards. And then the director of WandaVision after said, yeah, we never planned on Reed Richards coming in at all at this point in time. So that was like another example of theorists jumping the gun.
Yeah.
But I love it because it gets you thinking and it makes you excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely good, but I do think there's a certain point where it goes a little bit too far. Like I think when you get to the point where like the whole Ralph Boner situation, like when there's so many things that you're setting up that you're not paying off, like it starts to create a problem. I mean, and I would compare that to kind of like how Attack on Titan has been working, where it's like, you know, literally everything that they set up has some kind of payoff. Like, you know, you don't just have a character exist just to make you like, oh, I'm curious about that. It's like, oh no, it was nothing. Like that's not something that happens. And I don't think it's wrong to do it every once in a while, even like a small detail, like, oh, it's a fly, that must be Mephisto. It's not. It's just a fly. Like that's not a big deal, because that literally could have just been an accident. Like it could have just been. I mean, in theory, say that one shot didn't exist. It could have just been there was a fly in the room while they were filming. You know, like and you know, like I'm just saying, like there's certain things that
there's coincidental things that could have happened.
But otherwise, I think you know, you can't have like major characters show up that, especially like that look like you know, the X-Men, Quicksilver, and then turns out he's just a guy named Ralph Boner. Like it just seems too much non-payoff for me.
Which, let's talk about that whole Ralph Boner thing, because it was such like a double-edged sword. I mean, I thought it was fairly trivial. I mean, really, like you did all that just to set up a boner joke? It's like, okay, yeah, we did get to see Evan Peters essentially reprise his role in like a slightly different manner, but then it's just to be announced like, oh, Ralph Boner, really? Like just for a dick joke? Like you went through all that trouble just for a dick joke?
Yep.
Like, okay, when you really could have had something there.
Which, not to say, I mean, there is a chance that there's still something to it. Like they could.
No.
I mean,
I'll explain why.
But. I mean, if they wanted to, they could find a way to. I mean, they could say that like he's been here and like maybe something happened to memories or something, or like he's half there or something, because he did. I mean, it is kind of weird for someone to like laugh at their own name, even though they're still kind of under control. Like, you know, there's potential there, but I definitely think I'm leaning towards the side of not really anything going on.
Yeah, well, the reason I say not anything going on is because, of course, I was wondering, like, how did he get his powers? When in reality, Agatha imbued the necklace he was wearing with Quicksilver's powers, so then once that was released, essentially that whole illusion was gone. That's why I say there's nothing there. But then there's also, like, some little things, like remember, Agnes would say, oh, my husband Ralph. That was supposed to be her husband Ralph. But then there's also theories that, like, if you remember from early in the series, at episode 4, I believe, Jimmy Woo said, "Oh, he lost an operative inside." That was Ralph Boner. That operative could have been Ralph Boner.
Potentially, but
we don't know. Like, none of that's confirmed or anything. It's just.
I mean, I don't know about that
because
they were in the house and there was that, like, I forget if it was a picture or if it was something else, but like I do feel like he probably was just a resident of the place.
He could have been, yeah.
But I mean, who knows? There is a chance, like, if he's under control, that that he was maybe like, you know, the X-Men Quicksilver undercover or something. I mean, like, they could say that that's something, but you know, yeah, I feel like they're gonna leave that on the table, or, you know, just not do anything with it, because
yeah, definitely. I mean, they honestly, they killed it with the like, they shot it dead. In my opinion, they'd be beating a dead horse essentially. Like, obviously, if they bring Evan Peters back in like a multiverse sense, like, okay, that'd be completely understandable, but actually as Quicksilver, not as, you know, Ralph Boner, and then that could just be explained as, oh, doppelganger,
yeah,
or whatever. But as of right now, with Ralph Boner the human, the person, I don't think that they could really do much beyond that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just so, like, I remember sitting there. I would watch it at 3 a.m. I'd stay up, and I'd be like, I like laughed. I was like, Ralph Boner? Like, in the moment I laughed, and then I immediately after I realized, really, all for a boner joke.
Yeah, and and then I guess the last note that I had that we haven't talked about was I do kind of feel like they didn't need to throw Agatha in there, as of what we've currently seen. I mean, they did keep her alive and, like, available to come back if for whatever purpose,
which I think is the goal.
Yes, but I think for this particular story, I think it would have been far more interesting and honestly far, like, kind of bold if it was, like, more just about, like, her and, like, her grief, and, like, the grief was the antagonist of the story. Like, I think there's a lot that could have been done there that unfortunately they didn't do. But at the same time, I do understand, like, you know, Marvel is kind of something where, like, it's not really even worth it to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, if they do, that's good, but it's a lot easier to just go with the safe option that they know nobody's going to outright hate, but they're going to, you know, like, you know, if you get, like, an 8 out of 10, like this, like WandaVision did, the IGN, that's fine. Like, that's what they want. Like, they're just gonna make money off of it. Like, you know, you don't need to do, like, some kind of Citizen Kane of Marvel. But on the other hand, I would like to see that. I think it could have been interesting.
It definitely would have been a different change of pace, but of course, like you said, Marvel taking that risk, it's like they want to stick with really what the people thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah.
Rather than completely going out of pocket and being like, oh, this. But the reason why I say that Agatha should have been involved is because I'm just going to go out and say this. I just think the Scarlet Witch and Vision storylines are going to be very comic influenced, like way more than there were before. I mean, there's White Vision, which, you know, was in the comics, and Agatha Harkness, who was in the comics, which I think they did the reasonable thing with her and essentially, like, lock her in her own mind. That's essentially what Wanda did. But within the comics, Agatha eventually trains Wanda.
Yeah.
So I think that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, and I definitely could see it going that way. I mean, you know, it's very rare for Marvel to keep a villain alive if there's not a plan for them. I mean, you think about, like, in terms of who's been alive after. I mean, there was
Baron Zemo.
Yep.
Gonna be the most recent example of that, who is the main antagonist of the Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yep. Or there's I mean, there was Loki, obviously. He stuck around. I mean, you know, there's a lot, but you don't see that too often if there's not a plan. So clearly they're gonna do something with that, and we'll just have to wait and see what that actually is.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I do still think that within the context of the story, they could have had a better justification for her to be there. Maybe they could have taken a little bit more from the comics to explain that, but overall, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I do think it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like how Iron Man 3 was, where it is about their internal struggle, but like there's also just a regular bad guy there just for the sake of having one.
I think they wanted to kind of maintain a balance.
Yeah.
So like they didn't completely lose people, but they also piqued people's interest with something else.
Yeah.
I think that was the overall goal of that. But I mean, just speaking about Agatha as a whole right now, you know, she had that rabbit, right? Senor Scratch, I think was its name. My dad actually read to me a theory about that whole rabbit and what that rabbit could be. The rabbit being Nicholas Scratch, Agatha Harkness's son, who was also a warlock or like a wizard in some way, who Wanda eventually kills. Now, the reason why I say they might be also going that route is because now it could just be explained by Agatha just being weird, when she was like holding the rabbit and like encountered Wanda for the first time in the basement, she said, "Oh, looks like she finally discovered us." She started saying stuff like "us" and "we" and so on. That just leads me to believe that actually could be Nicholas Scratch.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good theory to me. I think that could, because him being the bunny is kind of like a contingency plan. Like if I fail, you'll be around. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, he could show up. He could be in Doctor Strange. He could be in Spider-Man 3. You know, who knows?
Who knows? Or whatever is next for the future in Wanda beyond Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a very interesting theory. And I mean, it is left open-ended that it could completely be plausible because we don't know what happens to the rabbit.
Yeah.
You could just say, "Oh, the rabbit got crushed in the house from the fighting," but like we don't know that.
Yeah,
you can't say that.
And and I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about was I really thought that the final goodbye, or not even like the semi-final goodbye between Wanda and Vision, I thought that was really nice. I thought it was good lines. I thought it was like it stands to reason that we'll say hello again. I'm like, yeah, that's nice.
They just give Vision all of the great lines.
I really like Vision from an intellectual standpoint.
Oh,
I think he's the type of guy that I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I relate a lot to him too. I mean, I'm not a very emotional person, but I kind of relate to myself in Vision in that sense, where it's like I'm a robot, but I'm also like human.
Yeah,
if that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, do you want to give a score out of 10? And I guess I'll do the same thing.
No, hold on. Before that, what do you think is just the future for Wanda? Like, what are your current speculations for Wanda? Whether it's in, and Vision, whether it's in Doctor Strange, the next Spider-Man movie, whatever.
Okay, so I think that in Doctor Strange, I feel like there's gonna be like a 3 player sort of situation. Like I think Doctor Strange is gonna be like the full-on protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be another somebody
that's
the full-on antagonist.
I think they confirmed that Nightmare is going to be the main antagonist of Doctor Strange.
All right,
but
so if
I can't really jump the gun on that because there's also been speculations where they're actually going to combine the characters Mephisto and Nightmare into kind of one overall villain, which is completely plausible. But Nightmare, I believe, is in fact confirmed for Doctor Strange.
Okay, so then like let's say it's Nightmare. So then I feel like Wanda will kind of be like a third player in that, where she's not entirely with
like
Doctor
an anti-hero.
Strange. Sort of, but I wouldn't
role?
I feel like she'd be like, I feel like she'll go in between, like basically an anti-hero. Like she'll help Doctor Strange, but then like at times, like when it doesn't benefit her goal, like she'll go against him. And then from there, I mean, I don't know. I feel like she might take a somewhat backseat in Spider-Man 3. I feel like that's going to be more Doctor
I don't even know
Strange
if she's
involved.
confirmed to be in Spider-Man 3.
Well,
I'm
that's
not
what I'm
sure
saying.
if she's going to be in it. But I mean, I think a plausible end scene of Doctor Strange could be her going back to Agatha and being like, yo, teach me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely plausible.
But I agree with you. I think like she will have some role. She's not going to be like a protagonist. She's not going to be an antagonist. She's going to be somewhere in the middle. But she's definitely going to have a predominant role, especially because she has the Darkhold.
Yeah.
The Darkhold corrupts people, and the Darkhold is directly connected to Dormammu, who we saw in the first Doctor Strange film. So they're definitely doing a very good job interlooping everything. Like you would never think a Doctor Strange movie would influence a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Almost never. You like me growing up with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, you would never believe that this would be reality.
Yeah, and I mean that's the great thing about a well done interconnected universe. That's what we can look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think with that, if we want to do our ratings,
Yeah, I think overall, I'm gonna give it somewhere between like a 7.5 and an 8. So I'm gonna settle just on 7.5.
yeah, that's around where I'm at. I might go down to a 7. I feel like I feel like it. I could see why people would rate it a little bit higher, and I actually I don't think they're wrong for doing so.
Same.
I think just for the stuff that I'm looking for, either in a I don't feel like it hit enough on what I want from like a film, and I don't think it hit enough on what I want from a Marvel movie. Like I think it was too much in the middle of everything, so it wasn't bad on any of those regards, but it wasn't enough of either of them in my opinion.
I mean, I will say that I agree with you upon all of that. Like they should have probably hit upon more of Wanda's grief, but then I also believe they should have hit upon Vision discovering everything. They just kind of went up the line, and I shouldn't even say went up the line because that's average. That means average, and average is a 5. So they definitely went like just past the line to where like it really grabbed people in. I mean, I would definitely say WandaVision is a must-watch for an MCU fan.
Well, if you're an MCU fan, everything's a must-watch.
Obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
but like even if you're looking to get into it, it's still a phenomenal show that you should watch that does keep you entertained throughout.
Yeah.
And at least from my point of view, being on the theoretical side of things, thinking of theories, watching videos, reading articles, so on and so forth, that makes it much more enjoyable for me. Like, my dad doesn't necessarily enjoy that because he'd be like, oh, spoiler. But, like, you don't know if it's a spoiler, and that's the glory about it. But I would say it's more of my reason my rating's not like an 8 or higher is because I'm not a huge fan of sitcoms. Brings it down a bit. And especially because of what they did with Ralph Boner. I was not a huge fan of that, and you could say I'm overreacting about it, but it's true. Like, they definitely could have had a lot more there. Like, the potential was set a lot higher than what they hit.
Yeah. And I would say that, I mean, I give it a 7 out of 10 on sort of like the sort of scale where a 5 would be like just complete average.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
So basically any sort of 7 or above is like definitely worth watching.
It's still
that's
phenomenal.
Not saying that it's bad, but I don't think it reaches some of the heights that other MCU things have reached.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I suppose we can close out this episode. First episode. Hopefully next time we'll have a name.
Hopefully. I mean,
and it'll probably be a little bit longer next time. There's certain things we'll probably start reviewing week to week when those are coming out. Like for instance, next week we might do the new Attack on Titan episode if we have thoughts on that. Hopefully it'll come out this week. They couldn't because there was an
earthquake in the prefecture that the animation studio's in, so they couldn't really work on it.
Yeah, so they that was a slight problem, but hopefully everyone's all right and they'll be able to get it out next week, and we'll be talking about that.
Ooh, there's a lot we want to talk about here. I mean, as of right now, especially with everything that's going on in the world, there's a lot of film and a lot of content coming out for everyone to enjoy. So expect stuff like Attack on Titan, and I believe movie theaters in our area are opening soon.
So we'll have like individual movies, stuff like like just standalone stuff
Like
that we'll go and
Godzilla
see.
and King Kong is supposed to come out later this month. We are planning to go see that, and we will review that.
Yep,
And also,
Snyder Cut.
Is actually the end. It's actually in less than a week.
Yeah.
It's actually this week. We're recording this on a Sunday. I believe it comes out this Friday, the 19th, or something like that.
I feel like it might be a little earlier, but we'll check on that. Don't take our word for it.
But that is definitely something we will be reviewing.
And of course, we'll be reviewing things, any like Star Wars content that comes out, any Avatar stuff when that eventually comes out with the new stuff. Like, and hopefully we'll have a video for you guys who are watching on YouTube in the coming weeks. We're getting things set up. We got a studio that we're thinking about putting together here, but obviously we're getting going. So if you if you made it all the way to the end, either follow or subscribe. Right now it's all 30330 podcast stuff still, so hopefully we'll be changing that up when we finally have a name. Maybe drop down some name suggestions here and there in the comments or anything. And of course, check us out. We're on YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Hopefully soon we'll be expanding to other platforms, but for now that's where
and follow our Instagram too for updates on the podcast and future projects that may be arising. I'm not going to necessarily say anything
all
right
information
now, but
like that. All the information will be in the description, and the only reason that I'm not saying it now is because by the time you're watching it, all the information could be totally different. When we finally have our name, saying what the name currently is wouldn't be helpful for you. So just check the description wherever you're at, and hopefully all the information will be there for you.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, it's been a good time talking with you guys, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Adios.